Good afternoon. My name is Monty Canode. I'm the Director of Customer Success at Horizon 3 AI, and we have got a great setup for you today here. Today, the conversation as we get to talk about an attacker's journey, and we get to follow with Noah on this journey. We're bringing his Luke, and we brought in an Obi-Wan here and Todd Pegram, who are going to get to introduce themselves here, reintroduce themselves to you here in just a little bit. And what we're going to focus on today is this thing called Kerberoasting. And you'll see on the back here, I got Attackers Love TGS. And if you know what TGS is, that is where we talk about the ticket granting system in the Kerberos protocol. At a very high level, this is an attacker technique that exploits weaknesses inherent to this protocol, which is much like many do. And they're going to go in depth on exactly how this protocol works, how and why an attacker does this, and where they do it at. Because what it is, this technique enables an attacker with a low privilege domain account to retrieve password hashes for a higher privilege service account. And why that matters. As we all know, attackers, they don't always hack in like in the movies. Usually what they're doing is logging in. And one of the best ways for an attacker to be able to establish a persistence and stay in your network is not by burning malware, because that's what all the tools are triggering on. What they want to do is be able to establish credentials. And with credentials, they look legit. And it is darn hard for your teams, your tools, and your rules to pick up on that kind of activity when it looks so legit. And so without any further ado, what I want to be able to do is bring us back home to Noah, our front-end developer turned attacker, and Todd Pegram, who is with Inversion 6, one of our incredible partners. He is a blue team extraordinaire, and I can't wait to introduce these two gents. I'm looking forward to you showing us the light on this technique and why this matters. Over to you both.
Yeah, thank you, Monty. So welcome, everybody. Just to kind of give you a background, if you haven't heard of me before, my name is Noah King. I'm a senior software engineer here at Horizon 3. Been with the company for a while, and picked up an interest in really learning cybersecurity, hacking, and learning all the things. So Todd, great to meet you. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, sure. My name's Todd Pegram. I'm the Director of Managed Security Services for Inversion 6. We, up until yesterday, we just went through a rebranding. We were MRK Technology, so you may have heard of us, but Inversion 6 is our new name. I run our SOC team as well as any products that are ran through the SOC.
Awesome. So how long have you been in the cybersecurity, background?
Well, officially, probably about 7 years. But I'm a Citrix guy from way back, 1999. And back in 99, everything was centralized in the data center. So we were kind of doing security without doing security, because everybody came in via dial-up into the Citrix environment.
Nice. Yeah. Great. Well, yeah, today, so the topic is Kerberoasting. I've been spending the last month learning all the ins and the outs of Kerberoasting. That was the topic that we decided was the most important. And I think the biggest thing to kind of level the field for everybody is, what is Kerberoasting? Can you give us a good overall background on it?
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen real quick. So every time a user, or in this case, a victim, wants to access anything on your network, the user is going to request a ticket granting ticket and provide the NTLM hash from its local machine up to your primary domain controller, which is going to act as your KDC, or your key distributing center. And then your domain controller is going to send back your ticket granting ticket encrypted with your KRB TGT hash.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're going to request a ticket granting service for the service account for that application or application server that you're trying to get. And then your KDC is going to send it back to you encrypted with that server's account hash. That's where your attack's actually going to happen. That's where we're going to get that TGS. But then from a user's perspective, it presents that TGS that it got and that's what allows it to communicate with the server back and forth.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. Like, if you really think about it, when I was going through Kerberos, I went back to the history of Kerberos. And if you're not aware, Kerberos is a Greek mythology name for the three-headed dog that guards Hades, letting all the undead out. You know, it's kind of the same thing. Don't let all your passwords out. Don't let all your users out. So Kerberos is sitting there as that service to authenticate us in and out of all of our Microsoft domain, correct? That's the, like, you know, your way in. You have to always go through Kerberos. Okay, so the thing that's also was difficult for me to learn, at least, is the amount of steps, right? You can see it goes from step 1, where we request a ticket granting ticket, we give an NTLM hash, we get a response back, and this back and forth type handshake over the network of validating you are who you say you are.
Right.
And in Active Directory, I guess this is a very common thing because the network, the enterprise gets very large, and there's many users on Active Directory network. So we're really relying on Kerberos, and this one KDC domain controller is kind of like the gateway into the whole domain, is how I see it.
It is. Honestly, it is. I mean, if you can get a service account, and especially if you have it with elevated privileges, like say a domain admin, and you make your service account, then you pretty much have the keys to the kingdom.
Yeah. And what's the service account exactly? Like, let's go deeper on that.
Yeah. So in a service account, say you need a SQL service account, so SQL admin to run your SQL service account because you don't trust local system. That's typical practice in large enterprises that you have those. You could also have, ideally you would have it with least privilege, so it would only be able to do a certain thing. But I've been guilty of it too in past life. I've given service accounts domain addicts because it's just easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, it's just easier, especially when you're in a pinch and you're trying to get something up. And least privilege can take a while to, actually get it to work correctly. So yeah, I mean, if you have one with domain admins, a service account, it's just, they can pretty much do anything they want on your domain.
Yeah. So let's talk about this too. So the Kerberos attack. So we see that the Kerberos protocol is here. In the bottom left corner, there's a victim or a user, and they're saying, hey, I want to access this database, or I want to use some kind of service that is on our enterprise. It goes through the KDC. And then if we misconfigure these service accounts, we could then Kerberos them, essentially, where we request a ticket, we take it offline, we crack that hash, and now we have that password hash. And that's really the whole steps to Kerberoasting, right? You just request a ticket, you take that ticket, you don't send it over to the service, take it offline and start hashing it and cracking it.
Yep.
Yeah. And some of the, I guess, downfalls of this this attack is, one, you can go be offline cracking it for hours and there's no detection. So it's kind of hard. Is it hard to defend, in your opinion? Or
yes, it is, especially if you can't determine, because by default in a Windows environment, it's only using RC4 encryption. You actually have to switch it to AES encryption. So, and you have to be very careful, because if you have legacy systems still in the environment, some of them do not support AES. So it's very hard. Even if you look at certain SIMs rules for this, they're only looking for the PowerShell version. So they don't even think about the Python version that could be running within packets. So it's very hard to detect. You really have to pay really close attention to event ID 4769, and then analyze all the authentication failures that you can get. And then you have to look for service accounts that are doing stuff that maybe they shouldn't do. You really need to understand what's going on in everybody's environment from a service account perspective.
yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good point in general. Like, if you think about it, Kerberos and the protocol and the amount of steps and the way that it works and the way that you might misconfigure something in your Active Directory, it only takes one misconfiguration to to get your whole enterprise domain compromised and get a domain admin, get the keys to the kingdom, do whatever you want from there.
Yeah, I mean, you could stay in there and keep persistence, and then when you get all the information that you need, then you can ransomware them.
Yeah. Monty, I got a question for you. As far as like the business impact, of course, we can, with this one exploit, this one attack path, we can get into an enterprise, you get domain admin. What do you think an attacker's like best practices would be then? Like, would they do ransomware? Where do you see this going from your experience?
So that's a great question. My experience on the business impact of this is once you get credentialed, when you get read-write, so it all depends on what that credentials access is. And with Kerberoasting being able to take a simple domain user and get some others, it all depends on the dump that you can get of those NTLM hashes and then where you can parlay those. If you're able to compromise a host, well, then you're dumping LSA, LSAS, SAM database, and other different kind of sensitive credentials. Once you get credential and you're able to crack it and then move from there, now you're talking about lateral movement that's virtually undetected because it's credentialed and it's authorized. So if you're not putting some restrictions in there, you're talking host compromise, ransomware exposure, sensitive data exposure, and then you start getting into the big one, which is domain compromise. Because we've seen it where you might have somebody who's embedded in a security group and they think they've only got a domain user credential, but they've also got a domain user credential, or somebody used that domain admin on a local host, and it's got local admin. And once you dump those, you're really able, that's where you start to see the pyramid scheme come into play and you're making big money.
Yeah. I think the moral of the story is Kerberoasting and this attack can be an end game for your enterprise.
Oh, it's such a horrible catalyst. You gotta fix this.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, if you don't mind, Todd, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and let's kind of jump into a demo. Let's see what I've been learning. I'll try to give you a live demonstration of me Kerberoasting some things, and we'll talk through it as we go. So I'll go ahead and I'll share my screen. And of course, shameless plug here. I'm not sponsored by Hack the Box or anything, but best way to learn these attacks and these techniques. So when I'm given the assignment, go learn Kerberoasting, first thing I usually look at is Hack the Box. I love it. They have a whole track on Active Directory. And the one that I actually went through was the Active Box. So if you want to do this, you can go spin up a vulnerable server, do the Kerberoasting. They got a walkthrough. I really highly recommend it. It's a great training platform. So wanted to share that. A couple of other things though. Once I started setting up my environment, what I did is I went to the AWS. I set up an Active Directory infrastructure. So I got a domain controller. I got a couple of servers, and I'm setting up a fictitious company here. And then one of the things that helped me validate and kind of test and just figure out, how do I get Kerberoasting to work? How do I cut it off? How do I fix it, mitigate it? I kind of actually used our tool to help us. And it was pretty interesting to me. I only have a couple of servers and I had 7 impacts. I got my domain compromised, my critical infrastructure, I got a host, some users, ransomware, sensitive data. It's very simple to kind of screw up one thing, and then you got a lot of weaknesses here. And the one that I'm really interested in looking at here is the Kerberoasting. And we're going to dive deeper into this. But this is kind of the attack path that we're going to take today. Imagine that we are sitting here where node 0 is. I'm going to find a domain controller that I have running on my network. I might start looking at SMB, looking at Kerberos. I see that Kerberos is available. I have a domain user. That is the name of my user. And once I have a domain user, I'm on that network, I'm going to start trying to do the Kerberos attack path. And then, I can, of course, verify and see all the proof. So it's pretty interesting. We're going to basically recreate this attack path. So that's a little bit on that background. Monty or Todd, any questions or anything about this so far before I move on?
No, I don't have any.
No, I'm good, man. Yeah.
All right.
Keep killing it, bro.
All right. So let's go on a little bit further. Let's imagine I got a Kali box here, right? And this is from the perspective that I've landed in your network. I've done something to get in. I compromised the user, whether it be phishing, whether it be hacking your WordPress server, whatever it is. I'm on your network and I'm running, some Kali here. I got my domain controller over here, and we'll go ahead and jump into this real quick. First thing I'll say in general, seems like Active Directory is just massive, Todd, to set up, to configure. There's so much here. And, you can see I got some users, and we got some managed service accounts, Docker, the file server, the SQL service. Those are our SPNs, or the service principal names that we're going to go after. So
I'm hoping those passwords are 25 to 30 characters long with spaces and that, because that's what they should be.
Some of them are. Some of them are. I did go with a longer password on some, and then I didn't follow the best practices, and I was trying to set it all up and get it working, and I kind of screwed myself over, as you'll see. First thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to do like some enumeration. Let's see what's on this network, and I know that I'm interested in this one particular host, this domain controller. So let's go ahead. Let's do an Nmap scan on it. That might take a second. While we're waiting, Todd, is this what do you normally see? Do you see Kerberoasting a lot in general from your experience?
We sit in, we report a lot. From anytime we see any Kerberos with RC4, we instruct our clients to investigate into going, to AES, test it in their environment, make sure we do monitor port 88, both TCP and UDP, to see if we have those. We create custom rules looking for specific things, dealing with Kerberos. We look at, again, event ID 4769 for a lot of failures with service accounts. We have some rules set up for that as well. But a lot of it, it's all on how the client has their AD set up. Yeah, absolutely. And, wherever you're at, as far as your experience, if you're new to managing Active Directory, I've only been managing it for a month. And as you can see, I have a lot of security vulnerabilities, but let's look at this Nmap output. So we can kind of see on this server, this domain controller, we got quite a few ports open. First things that I see that kind of stand out is we got Kerberos right here on port 88. We also, we can see that we're using LDAP. We see Active Directory. We can see the net BIOS name, the domain name, Snap Labs, local. That is my domain. So I know here that probably right away I'm dealing with a Windows environment. And this is just the first step that most attackers will take. They'll just sit there and do some enumeration, gather all the information, all the intel that they can about your infrastructure and your domain. So if we've done that, let's go a little bit farther. Let's use a tool called Impacket. And while I'm typing this out, Todd, do you want to maybe describe what Impacket is, what it does? Impacket is a Python module that can actually, in program that'll help enumerate and get 80 users. It can get server username principal, SPNs. It's really valuable inside of a hacker's toolkit, if you want to think from a red team perspective. So it's going to actually go out and query and bring back, because he already knows the user, so he's going to do password 1. And he's going to pull back a whole bunch of information and get all the users that it can. So it's doing AD enumeration.
Yeah. I think the things to add too is when I was going through Hack the Box and working with it, there are other tools such as like LDAP search and everything, but those are a little more syntax, a lot more work to kind of get what you're looking for. Impacket just makes it so easy. You really don't have to think too much about it. So the script that I'm going to kick off here is just Impacket. Let's get to Active Directory users that are on Snap Labs local. I already have a user because I've gotten on the network. My user is called domain user here. And the password for this user is just password 11. Not very strong, very bad practice in general.
Todd is not happy to see that password right now.
I know, right? So don't use that password. the DC or the domain controller IP that we're going after is 10.10.0254. And let's get all the users, put it in debug mode because I like to see all the output, and we'll run that. And we can see that we have some output here. We got administrator, we got guest, Kerb, TGT, domain admin, professor hacker, SQL service, domain user, and some other ones. Todd, when you're looking at this and you're kind of going through and you're starting to pull back users, what is the first thing that maybe scares you at this point? I'm already able to pull all the users on the domain. What is interesting to you?
Well, guest has never logged in, but it's never had a password set either. Your guest account should be set disabled automatically. If you're gonna use leave the local administrator account, on a domain controller, you pretty much have to, but on local systems, you might want to rename that account. And then use something like Laps to keep those passwords changing all the time. One of the, regularly you should change the password for the Kerberos ticket account. You should change that regularly. And you got a couple of accounts that have never logged in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so.
Yeah, so I think it's in general just keeping good hygiene on the users, the passwords, and making sure you're monitoring this all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's something you always got to be thinking about. That makes sense. So, all right. So we ran one in packet script. I know users. That's one part of it. Now I just need passwords. If I got passwords, I'm in. I can assume the role of that user. I can be that user. So the next script that I'm going to run, I got another one here, is in packet. Instead of get the AD users, we're going to get the user SPNs. And we talked about this word SPNs a few times, the service principal name. And this is really the piece that is going to allow us to do this Kerberoasting by having that service account. We're still going after the same domain controller. We're going to send a request. We're going to use Snap Labs local, my same domain user with password 11. And then I'm also going to take, if I capture any SPN hashes, I'm going to put them in a file and call it spnhashes.txt. So let's go ahead, let's run that. And you can see that we got a couple that came back: SQL service, Docker service, the file server service. And Todd, anything you see here that looks interesting to you, or anything you want to add on this?
Well, yeah, your SQL service account has elevated privileges. It's a domain admin. So if you crack that hash, you have the keys to the kingdom.
And is your main way just looking at the CN?
Yes.
Yeah. What does the CN stand for again? Is certificate name?
Common name.
Common name. That's right. Yep. One of those fundamental Active Directory terms. So we know that this is a member of domain admins. It's a member of users. It's on the domain controller Snap Labs local. So, all right, we got 3 hashes here. And if I do, I'm going to clear my terminal. I'm going to do a ls. You can see we have a file called spnhashes.txt. So let's just cat that file out. Take a look at the output. So here's the hashes that you can see. And we know in general, we might want to get that SQL service one. So this is the one I'm going to highlight just to let you see what this hash looks like. Is there anything in this hash that also stands out to you? You can see it's Kerb5 TGS. It's got the name, it's got the domain, and then just the hash. Is that basically it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
okay.
Hash. And you're going to use probably Hashcat to do that with RockU, and it'll probably crack that.
Yep, exactly. So I got these 3 hashes, right? And let's imagine now I want to crack them. It's very simple. There's not really a lot of commands to even Kerberos something. And, when your editor saves all your typing, it's even easier. So yes. Hashcat, mode 13100. If you go look it up in their documentation, that is the mode for Kerberos. We're going to crack the SPN hashes text. And the word list that I'm going to run against it to try to crack these hashes is RockU. If you're not familiar with RockU, it was a company back in the days. I think they had something to do with MySpace. And they stored all their passwords in plain text in the database. Had millions of users, I believe, leaked. So it's a very good one to go and kind of first try, at least crack against. Are there any other word lists in general, Todd, other than RockU?
I mean, there's all kinds. There's sec lists. There's a GitHub called sec list that you can pull down. The competition to hack the box uses sec lists a lot. You can pull that. That's try hack me. So
Yep.
you know,
Yeah, Seclist. I've seen that one on GitHub. They have and it can be for passwords, it can be for fuzzing URLs, it
Yep.
can be so many different things. So all of these word lists are out there on Google. And so we're going to rock you through it. And then if you crack anything, put it in an output of cracked hashes txt. So I'm going to let this run. Cracking hashes can sometimes be intensive and take a long time unless they're, pretty short and simple passwords. So we might take a minute or two on this. Anything you want to add in general about password cracking? Seems like the longer your passwords are, 25 characters and up,
it's going to take longer.
Yeah, the complexity really increases, especially from a mathematical complexity.
So Noah and Todd, if you guys don't mind, Todd, you keep advocating for longer complexity, but one of the complaints people have is that slows me down. It makes it that much harder for me to remember what it is. How do you recommend they implement a complex password system that is also easy on their maintenance and administration?
So for servers and in service accounts, I would use some type of like Psychotic or some kind of password manager for the service accounts. For your users, I would actually have them come up with a passphrase that they like. I'm a firm believer in using spaces and passwords because that's an extra character as well as special characters and alphanumeric numbers. But make it something that they know. I mean, you could get a 20 character password with something that my dog's name is blah and we got him in blah, with spaces. Make it a sentence. Some of the best passphrases are really, really, really long. The longer it is, the harder it's going to be to crack. And then if you take like instead of your A number, an A, you make it an @ sign. Instead of an S for a capital letter, if you have something with an S, use a $sign. Yes, it's a pain, but it'll save you in the long run because the easiest way in is to get a user. I mean, it's really simple. All you have to do is click a link in an email and they can download something and get your user account. I mean, it's just that simple.
Yeah, thank you, Todd. I just wanted to bring that up because that's one of the questions we get asked. And I think you definitely gave a couple options. Use a passphrase as one that can come together. NSA has even advocated for that as well. The other one is using a password manager, much like Noah's bringing up right here, to be able to set it and where you set what it is for these things so that it can even autofill when you come in. Thank you very much, you guys.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. In general, I always advocate for a password manager just as a regular user. Anytime I log into something, I'm not reusing passwords. I'm making long passwords because the longer they are, the harder they are to crack just due to math. It's just math. If you want to know, go look up more math in general. But it looks like our hashcat has finished. It looks like it says it's exhausted, it's done. And if we do a ls, you can see that we have a cracked hashes txt file. So let's cat the cracked hashes txt. And you can see I only cracked one. I was able to crack, though, SQL Service. The other two that I made, they were way more complex. I think they were only like 25 characters. They weren't 50 or anything like that. I wasn't able to crack them easily. I ran through the whole word list. But I can see that my password is right here. Password #101686. So I have that. Now that I have this cracked password, now it's just time to see what I can do with it, to pivot, to move around your network, to privilege escalate, cut things off, ransomware, whatever I want to do. It's up to me. That's just half the battle. So first thing I might do, you can run different commands. SMB map. This is just going to let me look at all the SMB shares. What do I have permissions to maybe read or write from? And it looks like in general, I have a lot of read-write permissions, which Todd, I'm sure you agree is a horrible best practice.
Well, it is. You're a domain admin.
Yeah.
You could wreak havoc. You could go to Sysvol and actually modify and put in a batch file to install ransomware that you want. It's
Are there any shares in general that stick out? Like you talked about Sysvol and putting some ransomware in there.
Well, Sysvol is the brains of your AD. That's where everything exists. That's where your login scripts run from. Net logon, you also have that too. You can make something run with net logon. And of course you have the $$ to pretty much every server in the environment and workstation.
Yeah. So, I can go in there, I can look around, I can upload things. I got rewrite permissions. So that's another bad misconfiguration, but let's keep moving forward with this. And I think if anything, the best or the most fancy part is always the reverse shell, at least for me. And I'm going to use another npacket script. Npacket, let's do a ps exec. Go to Snap Labs local, log on as the SQL service with this following password at this domain IP. Once I hit that, I'm on the server. I can say, who am I? NT authority system. I'm on a Windows system. I'm in. I can do whatever I want. I can look around. Can't do ls. I can go into PowerShell. I can look around through everything. So at this point, we've elevated up to domain admin. We're on your server, and it didn't take a lot of commands. Really, it's only maybe 3 commands tops. Anything you want to add here, Monty or Todd?
So I'm really glad, Noah, that you identified that at the very end. This did not take much. You're talking about a couple open source tools to be able to take advantage of in a couple steps, a vulnerability on a domain controller that could lead to a lot more. And so being able to walk through it is really darn important in everything. So if I was going to ask you something, Noah, what do you think you learned from this experience that maybe you weren't expecting, that you kind of went, oh, wow?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that I learned is when Todd showed all the protocols in the back and the forth, and the authentication protocol, and it's Kerberos, it's Windows, it must be complex. It was made by MIT. You just like, all right, this is going to be so hard to break. And then I go through it, 3 commands. And I'm like, that's it. There's got to be more to it. There, of course, is more. Impact is doing a lot of work, but it doesn't take a lot of skill. It doesn't take a lot of prior knowledge, a lot of tribal knowledge, a lot of training. You can find all this stuff on the internet. You can practice it, and you learn the flow. These are my 3 scripts, and then automate it, do whatever you can. It's way easier than I thought it was going to be. I think that's the biggest thing.
That's why blue team's hard.
Yeah. That's why I don't want to be blue team. It's hard.
Yeah,
that is. And that's exactly right. And so, Todd, I think you bring it up. So when you talk about blue team being hard and everything, Noah's a full stack developer, and he's taking a few notes on things he's going to think about. If you were going to give some recommendations, Todd, to everybody as a fellow blue teamer on what they should do, what would you tell them right now? Are there any steps and tips you would recommend to them?
I know I beat this one to a dead horse, but if, with your service accounts, make them long, 25, 30 characters, maybe even as much as Noah, and do, 50 characters with a password manager. Service accounts, you should probably not use them as domain admins. You should do least privileged, and you should still monitor those. Then if you do need to have one with elevated privileges, you got to make sure you monitor that constantly for suspicious activity and try to change it on a regular basis. If you can, in your environment, change from the default RC4 to AES encryption. That's a quick reg key, changing it from, I believe it's 14 to 17, and applying it. Then disable debug rights for your local administrator on endpoints and servers. If you can, implement LSA in protection to prevent credential dumping. On
you mean LAPS, right? LAPS?
Yeah.
Yeah. Local area password solution. Just making sure LSA secrets, something wholly different than
Yeah. Just use LAPS. And then limit who's in your domain admins and who has local admin rights on your box. Not everybody in your environment needs domain admin rights. You can also change the password of your Kerb TGT account and change it and monitor that account as well. And then again, monitoring your environment for event ID 4769 for excessive failures or successes from a service account on a box that it's not supposed to be running on.
You just went through a whole lot, and I think you've got, would you mind pasting that list into the chat? Yeah, just sure. So that everybody has that as kind of your 11 steps on, hey, these are the things I recommend. That's a great list, so that when people are going, okay, where do I start? You just gave them some great starting points to go through. And so thank you very much, Todd, for putting that out there for everybody.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No problem.
Yeah, I think some of the other things to add too, as you look through this, you really have to think about all the different approaches that somebody might take, on your network, and also educating yourself about how these exploits work, trying to do them yourself, using tools to help you verify if you've made these changes. Because you talked about changing the encryption method to AES. Like, how do I verify that? How do I make sure? Of course, you can do it on Windows, and there's different things, but I thought this would be interesting to also include. I pulled up Wireshark, and we're going all the way down to the network level here, looking at the packets that are being transmitted over the network, right? And Wireshark's awesome. I haven't used it a ton, but I filtered down to Kerberos. And as you can see all these terms: the ASREC, the ASREP, TGS rec, response or reply, all those things that Todd showed in that diagram. Here they are in Wireshark. We can see them coming back and forth, and we can look into the packet. Here's the Kerberos request body being sent. We're logging in as the domain user into the realm of Snap Labs local. And then if we continue to go through, we can see a response or a reply back. And the things that are really interesting here too are just kind of looking through. You can see I was requesting ticket grading service. I have a request for SQL service. I believe that's how it is, Todd. You might have to help me out with these network packets here. But yeah, we're requesting the SQL service here at this point. We get a reply back. And then this cipher here, you can see we're using HMAC MD5. That ciphertext is that encrypted hash, which I then take and, we decrypt or we crack it offline. So using Wireshark and looking at what's going in and out of your network and using other tools.
Oh yeah. That's why network taps and, in my opinion, you should also be monitoring your LAN interface with some kind of IDS as well, because you may have the greatest EDR on your systems, but if you have a rogue system in your environment and you're not monitoring your LAN traffic for anomalies, then you can have, again, the greatest EDR that you have, but if you're not monitoring it with some kind of packet capture tool internally, you may miss things like an Nmap scan, because where Nmap in itself is not nefarious. So you're not going to see it, but you'd have to monitor for anything looking for an ICMP, anything looking for a TCP that's out of the norm in your environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Some side notes and questions. So that kind of concludes the portion of the hacking. And again, to go back, we kind of recreated this attack path, and I use our own tool to kind of help me with my research. But let's go back to the domain controller in general and Active Directory. A couple of questions that I came up with as I'm learning Active Directory is, one, Active Directory is massive. I made a very small Active Directory and had tons of exploits available to it. What are like the best ways to learn Active Directory in your opinion?
That's hard. Now, I actually deployed the first AD that I ever did back in 2000, and I did a whole lot of things wrong that I know now. I wish I'd have knew then, but by default, if in your group policies, you get nice little group policies by default, but you really need to actually turn on some advanced policies. You need to turn on some additional auditing to be able to track things the best way. There's actually a couple of good documents about using Windows Event Collection in your environment by Olaf Hartong and Palantir, actually the defense contractor. You can just search them up, and they give you some good baselines of doing advanced auditing. I would do advanced auditing on your domain controllers. I would actually do them on your member servers. I'd actually do them on your endpoints as well.
Yeah,
If
absolutely.
I can throw one thing in there, Noah, auditing is one thing. Attacking is another. And by going out and attacking it, you're going to really know, did this, am I misconfigured? You're showing, look at all the security groups you got here, Noah. There is such an opportunity to have another credential in a security group for somebody who left the company, who shouldn't be in that right group. Maybe they're in multiples or something. The opportunity to misconfigure is so high. And by attacking it, and going through a Kerberoasting kind of process, you start to see, oh, geez, I didn't know this. So an audit is great for a policy check, but attacking it is a great exercise in seeing this is actually what happened, what kind of attacks and what that could lead to know where I need to fix my AD configuration.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just building on, you're right, Todd. I just want to say those things are very complementary. It's amazing how people view an audit and a pen test as against each other, when the bottom line is they are both trying to accomplish the same thing.
Yes.
And both give a perspective that is valuable in becoming more secure.
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree. Kind of like having NetBIOS in an environment when you don't have a Win server. I mean, everything gets a NetBIOS name, but do your NICs really need to use NetBIOS? If you don't have a Win server, do you really need it turned on? You know?
Yeah, very much. Hey, Noah, before we go, we've got just a couple questions. Sure. And I did want to ask you one because you showed it. You showed a web browser using a password memory tool. We talked about GMSA with group managed service accounts. We talk about LAPS, local area password solution. You pulled up from your browser a password memory tool and everything. Todd, as a blue teamer, do you encourage doing such a thing?
Yes, I do. I actually use a competitor of the one that he's using. I use 1Password, but LastPass is great. KeyPass is good. You know, Thycotic, if you want to spend the money for it, that's really good as well. You know, there are enterprise solutions for it. So I think password managers are great, especially for service accounts.
Yeah.
You know, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I would say in general, you know, if you're not using a password manager, even in your regular life, that's one thing you got to switch. I know it's hard, and a lot of times people just, they come up with 1Password and they use it for everything. And if somebody gets that password, they have access to everything. So password managers are great. One of the things I was going to also add, if you want to practice attacking these things, you clearly don't probably want to always attack your environment of Active Directory at work. Maybe that's not the best practice. One of the tools that I found when I was coming up with how do I build an Active Directory environment and set it all up, Snap Labs. Don't know the company, don't have any affiliation, just found it really simple. They have a bunch of templates of different size companies, Active Directory for different server years. And I just clicked a couple of buttons that spun it all up, and then I started attacking it. So I would recommend that, Hack the Box. And, you know, the last question I have for you, Todd, is we talked about there's a lot of mistakes that you can make with Active Directory and the chances for misconfigurations, and it's massive. What do you think are some of the biggest mistakes users make when they manage Active Directory? Is it the service principal names, or are there other things we should also be aware of?
Actually, I think AD cleanup. You got to make sure when people leave, you're disabling accounts. I know it's really if it's a admin, somebody on the server team and all that, everybody's over that real quick because they probably had domain admin rights. But you should really do AD cleanup. You need to get rid of computers that no longer exist in AD. You need to get rid of all users, disable them for a while, then get rid of them. Everybody is really scared about changing service account passwords. Set a maintenance. Do it during a maintenance window. That way you can change the password in AD and then go change it on everything that's using that account. For SQL, you should probably have a SQL agent service. You should have individual accounts that only run the services that you need. You shouldn't just have one that runs all of them.
Yep. Awesome. Monty, you got any questions or anything you want to provide feedback on? That's mostly everything I got.
No, this was great. I think this was really valuable because Active Directory, what an incredibly powerful tool. Holy smokes, what an incredibly powerful and easily misconfigured and easily over-rotated tool where you can take advantage of. And I'm glad there's guys like Todd out there who are trying to save us from ourselves. And no kidding, Noah, thank you very much for digging into this. This is an incredible technique that is very valuable and still being used to this day, combined with open source intelligence and such. Oh man, super valuable. Did you have anything you wanted to close us with, Noah, on your journey and where you see us going next on this pathway?
Yeah, so I mean, where we're probably going to go next, we're still coming up with different ideas, but one of the things that we thought might be interesting is you have an Active Directory environment, and then maybe there's a way, or we're going to pivot to the cloud. Essentially, we're trying to go to the cloud. Let's enumerate, let's exploit the cloud, go after AWS, maybe Azure, maybe break our way in from the outside. So maybe we'll do a little bit of web app hacking, land on a server, find our way up to the cloud. So we might try to do a lot more lateral movement, a lot more exploitation with the next one as well.
Very nice. I'll tell you, people always decry those Todds who are out there who save passwords in .txt files, but you can find them in Etsy Shadow every now and then too when it comes to those creds.
Oh, yes, you can. And actually, for your next segment, you could most people run a service account on their AD sync going to Azure for Azure AD. You can just, if it's not a super long password, you might be able to, crack that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Might be. Okay, Todd, thank you very much for joining us. You and in version 6, we're wishing you the best of luck. And thank you for bringing your awesome insights into this and helping mentor Noah.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for inviting me.
Thank you for joining us, Noah. You handsome man, you. I'll tell you, this thing just looks better and better every week, bro.
Right?
I don't know if you're taking it from here and putting it down here, but it looks pretty spectacular.
Yeah, I'm working on that gray beard. We're getting there.
Yeah, it looks great. Dude, another great week. Can't wait for everybody out there. Thank you very much for joining us. If you have any questions whatsoever, you can send them to customer.success@horizon3.ai, and we'll make sure that Noah gets your questions. We'll make sure that Todd gets your questions as well so that they can have any follow-up. If you've got blue team, red team, full stack side of the house, we want to make sure that we can go deep down into the tech with you as much as you need to get some of those answers and make sure you're starting to move out right in your own Active Directory area. So thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll close out this week strong. Thank you very much, Noah and Todd.